I think I intuitively knew upon our leaving Massachusetts, this next chapter and stage was going to be focused a lot on our relationship and our dynamic, and really stepping into the versions of ourselves that we're uncovering as very unique and different people, or perhaps not even different people. It may seem that way, but an elevated version of ourselves that neither of us have met before. And that may sound a little bit strange, but when we left California, over 2 years ago, to go to Massachusetts, we weren't that version of ourselves. And I think coming back here at the beginning of September-ish, now we're releasing this in December, so we've been here a few months. It's almost as though I outgrew that version of Elise and had shed so many layers, but then brought them all back and put them on when I got here.
Yeah.
Because it was familiar and comfortable. And I began recognizing within myself as within you some of the same patterns that we didn't necessarily, I guess, transcend in Hollywood, and beautifully have been shown over the last couple months that the intentions that I continually set, as you continually set, to elevate in consciousness as a being for ourselves and to better serve others, we cannot be those versions of ourselves. And I think a part of it was, wait a minute, but like I can.
Yeah.
I think I can. Like I've got this figured out. It's like, nope.
Yeah, there's a really beautiful reminder in that like transformation isn't linear, and that like growth isn't linear, and that even when you do like kind of maybe like take those steps and grow and evolve and change, it's still possible to get pulled back into different like patterns and older patterns, and especially with like you said, like a big move. And at first everything was like exciting and new, but then it was like us on our own again, and it was us back in something that, even though it was different, was familiar. And then it's like you find those like ruts in the ground, and like you slide into an old path or pattern, you find it's like what's happening in your brain, like some of those neural pathways still exist, obviously. And it's easy to slip back into those and start being a person, and a person that you no longer want to be, or somebody who you used to be. I guess it's a nice reminder to not beat yourself up too, because it can be really, really frustrating to think like, oh, I need to be at a certain level. And to believe like I'm past that. Actually, like you said, you even in like kind of the introduction there, it's like, did we like fall back? Like maybe you haven't transcended those things, and like, and I'm not saying that you are shaming yourself, but it's easy to have that reflection of, oh, I thought I was past this. I thought I was better than this. I thought I was more spiritual than this, or whatever it is, and beating yourself up. And then I think that just makes it worse. And, I think luckily we have sort of had the awareness to catch these things, but I think it's a really common trap that we've definitely fallen into before too. Like this isn't the first time I've fallen into old patterns and behaviors, and just sort of found myself all of a sudden being a different version of myself that I no longer want to be, if that makes sense.
I wholeheartedly believe that this journey is an elevation, an ascension. It's not necessarily forward in motion, even though it seems illusory that we're moving forward in a direction of a perceived future that hasn't happened yet. But we're really creating the future from this now moment. And I say it's an upward journey, it's an elevation, because I can look almost down with a higher perspective. And I believe that when we left Massachusetts and made the decision to come back here, we said yes, right? We
Yes.
literally, it was, okay, wait, this is a possible scenario, one out of infinite potential realities that could be. Okay, we agreed, like, yes, didn't know how it was gonna happen, and everything aligned perfectly with the house, getting a new car, manifesting a lot of money really, really quickly, manifesting like the cross country trip, everything perfectly, the dates of court, everything. So I think perhaps in my naivete, I was like, okay,
got it, yeah, made it.
I'm done. I'm the higher version of Elise, like, and it was like, whoosh, cosmic 2x4. As soon as we got here, within the first couple weeks, within really that month, I think October hit, and I was like, oh, all right, yep, we're back alone, like completely alone. We really do not live near friends or family, or anything. And it's like, okay, so that's why I said the intuition that I had was, okay, this is for Dan and I, because we've always talked about when we were leaving in LA, that was such a big portal for us as well, that we were asking to grow. And I think for myself, I guess you could speak about it, but for your perspective, I get why Massachusetts was the next step, because it brought me 2 years of very, very deep introspection and contemplation and feeling things I've never felt before. And so, yes, it was almost if we had stayed in Hollywood, I couldn't have become or let go of all of those layers that were required. And now here I am. It's almost just like the past was there, so, teach me, not trap me, as I always say. But and I wanted to, like, it makes sense for me just because of like the family and myself. But do you agree that you grew in a way that like you didn't see coming?
Yes, for sure. I think of it as actually interesting. It's I think very similar, but also is like I had a very different experience than you had for those 2 years, but it was also very a lot of it was just sort of like humbling, and a lot of it was just kind of giving me a chance to definitely better understand who I am. And I think after the 2 years, like I left very different than I got there.
Yeah, I think that we did learn a lot in Massachusetts about our relationship and how it was really codependent, and it continues to be to some degree, but so much better than it was, because we are pretty introverted and enjoy our alone time and enjoy the company of each other, but also have wounds of, oh my gosh, like, did I just make Dan? That like throws me off my whole day. Like, he's not talking. Is he mad at me? And that stems from obviously childhood, never mind our relationship, but it was beginning to rear its head. The shadow was beginning to come to light, and I mean the shadow of our relationship as a couple beginning to come to light, and then it's, I feel like, very heightened now, and we can kind of get into that. And I think this is really funny. I actually didn't recall this when we were kind of prepping for the show, and I think it might be actually like a good segue into talk about like this really big conversation that we had, because when we were having Thanksgiving, Dan's brother's girlfriend, we were all just sitting around, like, after having, drinks and pie and all good food. And I can't remember what we began talking about, but she started asking, like, what were like young Dan and Elise like as a couple, like high school and college. And I was like, we kind of looked at each other, like, I barely remember that. Like, I wonder if a part of me like doesn't want to go there, because I'm not super proud of it, but also know that she was very much in survival mode. We both were, and trauma bonding in a lot of ways. But I also, it's hard to recollect that person because I'm not her anymore. So to pull for memories that I feel like aren't even there because I've worked through them, integrated them, healed these really big pieces of me. They're not there. And it's a different, wiser version of myself in a way. But a lot, what I realized then, we had this big conversation after, what I then realized was, oh, I have exponentially grown, but there are so many patterns that have been unconscious within this relationship dynamic that I had no idea was a part of my makeup until you were able to gracefully show me.
Yeah, and we'll maybe come back to that a little bit, but there is something really that I think people will really, I think it'll resonate with people, what you're saying. It's like this idea of like, I think when you're on this sort of journey and like really trying to focus on like the present, that you start to lose a lot of memories and sort of connections to the past. And it can be confusing and like frustrating at times. But also I think there's something really powerful in it because you still have the like lessons of the experience. And it's like, I learned so much from that younger version of myself. But when I look back and think about him now, I don't remember a lot of the details of the things I was doing on the day to day. I remember like what it felt like to be him and like how like, yeah, he was doing his best. And it's like this young boy, like depending on whatever age, like even this little boy to even like, you know, looking at myself in college and like I saw like when we first started dating, it's like he was doing his best. He just had no idea. And he was making a lot of really, really bad decisions. But those decisions were, like you said, sort of based on survival modes, based on getting external validation and love and feeling safe and feeling okay and trying to do what he thought he was supposed to do. But it's weird, like there's also, so I can look at him with like this empathy, like he is somebody else, and I can love him like unconditionally, but also like there's this sort of disconnection that I have. And I know so many people who like still remember like every detail of everything that they ever did and like parties they went to and places and like will like just have these memories. Like I have no recollection of that. And like I know like what it was like to be me back then, but I don't remember very many of the details when I was going through it. And I think that it is a common thing. I don't think I'm crazy in this. I know I've heard other people talk about experiencing something really similar. And then kind of along with that, like you're saying, there's also these like subconscious patterns, and especially being in a relationship where we were very, very different people when this relationship started, like 20 years ago. We were such completely different versions of ourselves. So as much as we've changed since then, especially like consciously, and like my conscious awareness is very, very different than what it was back then. But there are subconscious things that I still do that I lost, or not lost. Like I don't think I ever knew like why I was doing them. So there are things that were rooted in like lack of worth and just like feeling like I wasn't enough. And I picked up habits along the way. I picked up ways of being, ways of relating to the world, ways of relating to you that just sort of became what I do. So then when I changed so much, there's still some things that weren't necessarily like looked at and excavated and studied. And I just sort of took them for granted. Like, oh, that's just what I do, or that's just what happens. Not realizing that on like an energetic level, as I would do these things, they were informing my consciousness of not enoughness or shame or guilt or fear. And yeah, it was just like these patterns playing out. So like there were these like, even having done a bunch of shadow work in my life, there was still these subconscious patterns that almost like didn't have like powerful memories associated with them. They were just patterns, but those like ingrained patterns were still reflecting something that I was bringing into my life now, and not realizing that so much of my life was being controlled by, like I keep saying, like a not enoughness and like this sort of lack of self-worth that I, in a lot of ways, believed I had transcended, but it was showing up in ways that I didn't realize it.
Yes, me too. And one of the things that we've been focusing on for, I would say, the better half of like, I don't know, maybe 4 years-ish is communication. On both of our parts. I mean, I feel like I had been a little bit better, and then just took you a little bit longer, but I also recognize my role in that. And how I recognized that role was listening to a podcast about relationships, and 2 guys were on there talking and saying, like, you ever try to tell your girlfriend something and she just like blows up, and then it's like whoosh, walls go up. Like, to what degree are you open and available and receptive to hear your partner, whether it be male or female? But I guess it typically is with like the male female dynamic. Like, men aren't as vulnerable or haven't been given the space to speak vulnerably, perhaps. And women are like, just jump in to either shut it down or whatever. And I was like, oh shit, I do that. And I remember coming up to you after listening to that segment being like, I'm so sorry. And really, honestly, taking responsibility for something that, again, was unconscious. I didn't know that I was perhaps stripping away something that is so deep and vulnerable for you, and not even listening. And I wasn't present at those times. And I can only hear you to the degree that I can hear myself, because that meaning, like, I am filtering how you speak and your way of living through the lens of my ego. I'm being someone in relation to Dan and how he's acting. So that really hit me. So then I feel like also when we opened up the communication portal, more and more started seeping in, because when I'd see you eye roll at something that I'd say or do, or anything like that I would do, that vice versa, it was like, okay, let's stop in the moment here. And instead of holding that in, can we reach some sort of dialogue and understanding what's going through your head and how you perceived it and what I was doing in that moment? Because every time we did that, it was never in alignment. It was from your perspective and then from my perspective. And then we began seeing, oh, all right, this is how your mind is operating. This is how my mind is operating. Neither one is right. Neither one is wrong. It's a different perspective. And it's like, oh, all right. It was almost like it was a sigh of relief. It was just like, okay, so I don't have to continue to tiptoe around him, or he doesn't have to continue to do whatever around me. It's, where can we offer more loving awareness for the perception that you as a unique individual, Dan, holds, and then Elise holds, and how can we grow that in this kind of energy bubble of Dan and Elise as a relationship coming together and formulating a really beautiful bond.
Yeah, and that's it. Kind of almost like when you started talking about the show, it's like we've both grown so much as individuals, but not necessarily, like, the relationship is almost like a third individual. And it took, like, you know, like all the work we've done on ourselves, it still took a long time to realize that, like, in those moments, like, I'm having a relationship with the relationship of Dan and Elise, kind of, and like, and you are, and we're both living in completely different realities, where you are the version of you that I have in my head or in my mind, and that I'm the version of me that you have in your mind. And a lot of times those are in alignment or close enough that we don't realize it. And I think this is something really, really interesting just about the world, where it's like everybody that you meet is just your concept of that. And when we're having conversations with whether someone you're walking by on a sidewalk or like a really good friend or a partner, it's still, you're still having a relationship with like, it's like the aspect of me that is you in a lot of ways. It's like the idea that I've built up. And so much of that stems from 20 years ago.
Yes.
And my own shit with everybody else and with my mom and my other people I've met, like it's just everybody who I've interacted with in my life is also mixed into this sort of like concept of you that I formed in my mind. And then you also have your concept of me. And that's sort of what you're alluding to, is that we've kind of got to the point now where we're at least aware of that. And we can talk about things because like we're both having a completely different experience in these moments that are like, whether they're fights or disagreements or just things during the day that like agitate us.
And life itself, as beautiful as it is, always is presenting us with the continual opportunity to grow. And I think for so long, especially in Massachusetts, like I said, I think we were working more individual. We saw a little bit of the codependency, but like we weren't in the union of this relationship. And here it was just laid out. And it was, I think when you're truly on this ascension path and so aware and tapped into the thoughts and feelings and behaviors and perceptions of yourself, you can then really see it in a dynamic. And I think that that's happened with us because these patterns weren't happening, like they began happening weekly.
Yeah.
Monthly and then weekly and then every other day. And then it was like, wait a minute. All right, this is repeating. Like, what aren't we saying? What's going on? Like, are we not being truthful to either ourselves or a couple? Like, what's happening? Like these things that the identity that I hold as Elise has created this version of Dan to truly learn through. But that version that created her, like you said, was from, I don't even know how many years ago. I don't think it was 20 because there's been versions, but it like maybe 10 or maybe 15, like it was at least a decade. I had this idea of you and that was perfect. It was perfect for what I needed to grow through during those years. But now I'm like I said, like a different person, or I'm the same person, but like the layers aren't there. Of limitations. And now the version of Dan that I require to learn through is different. And so I think the patterns of the older Dan that I created was just heightened and showing up like day after day in different scenarios, big, small, and everything in between, to gift me the opportunity to be like, Elise, like, look at this, really, truly look at what you're doing, because I also know I cannot change you.
Yes.
I cannot change anyone for that matter. And I've been humbly granted the opportunity and gift to learn through that over the past 2 years, but really over the past like 3 to 4 years. And I can't, as hard as I try, like to do things like, okay, he's going to do it this way. He's going to do it that way. He's going to change this. He's going to change his mentality. He's going to do this differently. It literally never worked. I realized, and this is all through self-reflection and books and podcasts and documentaries and this journey of, okay, the minute that I begin changing myself and who I show up in the relationship with Dan, that's what changes him. I'm not changing him. It's the perception I have of him is now going to change. It's because my reality is different. It's literally, it's so, am I explaining it correctly? Like, I know that you know.
This makes so much sense to me. It's all perception.
Right.
And it's like, it might sound crazy, but it's like, I am everything.
Yes, hold on. I want to make sure to wrap this around. Like I had began saying that, like my ego, the identity that I hold, was creating this persona of you that I required to learn and grow through. And then it reinforced it. Like, see, oh, Dan didn't do this. Oh, see, he didn't change. Oh, Dan fucked up in this way. Oh, see, Dan, and I had evidence. And it was, again, that continuation of the identity, the perception, the lens that I was looking through in regards to you and how I was relating to you that just kept the cycle going.
Yeah.
But that I broke that cycle, I broke the pattern. So now it was like, holy shit, the wipers, blinders are so much, they're gone, it's cleaner. It's like, oh, this entire time, it was me. This whole time, it was me and the smaller self, the identity, the ego identity, whatever you'd like to call it, constructing this version of Dan for me to learn through. But now, because like that's the safe space that it created, and the only way that I know how to perceive you, it doesn't want me to see you differently in a way.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like a threat to your identity and your concept of me if you allow yourself to see me differently than the image in your mind.
Isn't that so fucked up?
It is, but it's like this whole game is so cool.
Well, I was just gonna say it's fucked up, but
Yeah.
also like once you realize it, it's like, oh, that's what it's like, oh, okay, all right.
And that's what I think. It's like it's so empowering to realize that
So,
we are.
Yes.
It's like everybody literally like just contains everything. Everything is everything, and we are picking and choosing certain aspects of them that are also aspects of us because we are everything. And it's like the parts of me that I'm judging, I'm seeking out in you so that I can judge them because that feels better than judging myself. Or the aspects that kind of like mirror it. So if I'm upset with myself for not taking responsibility for things or whatever, I can look at the aspects of you that are kind of like parenting and nagging and like, nothing's good enough for Elise. What a bitch. Because then I don't have to take responsibility for doing something that I wasn't proud of. And it's like we seek these things out in people to make us feel better. But also the purpose of it is that it is there, like you said, is there to show us because it keeps getting louder and louder and louder, more often and more often and more often until we change it within ourselves. And by change it isn't really the right word, but like address it until we like love that aspect of ourselves and like can really take it in and like hold it and love it and be okay with it and allow it. And then the moment I allow the aspect of myself that, you know, doesn't do things, isn't responsible enough, we'll say, that's the moment that you stop nagging me. Because it was never you, it was me seeking that out in you in a really, really cool game that we're playing that's like so unbelievably interactive that we can be having a conversation or a disagreement and we're both having a completely different experience because that's not the part that you're focused on because you have a whole other thing.
Yeah. Well, let's dive deep into this conversation because I feel like we're already there. Yeah. I think at one point after like just days of weeks for me for sure just crying and feeling like hopeless and just like losing my mind. It's really the only way that I can describe it. That's saying, you know, you lose your mind to find your soul. That truly is it. It's the dark night of the soul. I like to call it the dark night of the ego because our soul knows no dark nights. But it's truly that ego identity that I've created is going absolutely nuts and I'm crying and I can't understand it. And then it's just like, I think we got to the point where it was like, we're sitting down and we're literally speaking our truth, like absolutely not holding back. If we need to rip into one of each other, do it. Like every single lie, every single thing that we're holding back, like we are going in. And by lies, I mean like what we're not speaking each other. Like I'm not talking about, oh, like I cheated on you and this. No. I meant like what am I lying to myself about and i.e. lying to you about?
The things that we don't talk about because we do tend to convince ourselves that we can hide things. And it's like, I'll be mad at you about something that you do and I'll just be like, well, that's just how she is. I'll deal with it. I'll push through it. But all I'm doing by trying to suppress that and deal with it is perpetuating that because it's in there. That energy exists within me. So I'm going to keep finding it in me.
Exactly. And I think that our spiritual ego
Mhm.
really hijacked us here, where we've been on this, process and this path for so long that exactly what you're saying. Dan's just that way. Love him. You're
Mhm.
supposed to just love him the way he is. Well, fuck off. Like I am. I'm trying to love him, but like it's just like, and I do.
It sounds like it. I'm convinced.
Okay, so I think, well, you had touched upon not feeling good enough and not feeling worthy. That I think that's a theme that every single one of us on the planet goes through, a limitation that we come here to transcend and integrate into ourselves so that we can unveil the worthiness, the value that's inherent. And it's just our perspective that got us to the point, our thoughts that became beliefs of being unworthy or not enough in some way, that it doesn't even make sense. So I always felt this my whole life. And so what I did as a compensation was people please and become like the rescuer archetype. Like I will do anything for you. I'm a yes girl. And then I'm the fixer. Like if you have a problem, I'll come and fix it for you because I'm the one who handles everything. And then I got up on my high horse and I'm like, I know everything. I'm super controlling. I know how to do everything. And it just fed this part of me that didn't feel good enough in some way. It fed the validity of what I was doing as enough. I garnered my value in people liking me because I was doing everything that they wanted them to do. And then basically rescuing people. Like that's what, because in our relationship, I don't contribute monetarily like you do. So I feel less than. And so the compensation pattern was me just being like, I'm going to do everything, but like, I'm going to watch Dan fuck up so that I can come in and fix it, rescue him, rescue us, pat myself on the shoulder, be like, see, he needs me. How could he ever leave this relationship? He can't even do the dishes. He can't book flights. He can't book trips. He can't book this. He can't do that. He can't do business. I got it. And that's me sitting up on this like high horse of, and the irony is my entire life, or a lot of this relationship, but really like my entire life, all I wanted is for someone to take care of me. And when I had that realization, and you even said like, I can't even take care of you, it was like, that's on an energetic level that is so ingrained within the psyche that I hold, this persona, this identity that I've created, that I'm energetically blocking you from the very thing that you want to do so that I can be right over here, my ego propped up on this amazing rescuer, fixer, like I've got it type of thing. And it's kind of hard to put into words, but all I want is in the relationship is like to not have to worry about doing things for you and that you just do them on your own. And I don't have to follow you around almost and like watch over your back. It's like, I just want to like fucking chill and relax and not be stressed and worried and not have to like swoop in with like my superwoman cape and save the day. But then that's what I was doing because I was emotionally attached to the high that I got from coming in. I'm trying to, I want to use an example.
Okay.
I think examples are going to be good in this sense. We'll use gardening as an example because we haven't been gardeners. And it's having a yard and having things around. It's something new and unique. And not that I adore nature. I enjoy being out there, but gardening and actually taking care of a huge garden, let alone like grass and plants and trees and bushes and things, it gets very overwhelming. And I began doing it and I was just getting like, what the shit? Like, I don't want to do this. I want Dan to do it and he's not. And then like, day would go by, he's not doing it. Day would go by, weeks, and I'm like, I guess I gotta do it. I have to do it because this a-hole over here isn't doing it and doesn't like care. But I did it, so yay me. So, because you'd always thank me too. Oh my God, you did the gardening, thank you. Yeah, of course, you're welcome. And I just was propping myself up for something that I never even discussed. I literally made up this story in my mind. So it's a very small story, and I hope it's like a good example of it. But what's funny, and the reason why I'm using the gardening as an example, because as I recognized this and recognized it as a pattern in myself, even before we had this really big talk, I would come back, I came back from a walk one day and you were gardening. And I was like, oh, interesting. I didn't ask you to do it, nothing. It was like, interesting. And then like a couple days went by, another week went by, 2 weeks went by, and you just like went out there. I'm gonna go shovel. I'm gonna go rake and do, and I was like, huh, that's interesting. And it just started to click, like, he actually handles a lot of things. And then I started to realize, oh, wait a minute. He has done this and he's done this and he booked this and he got this really good business thing. And then like when we were moving, he handled all this and then he handles the expenses here and then he's done this. And then I started finding evidence of everything that you have done. And I was like, oh my gosh, he's not doing anything differently. I just brought awareness to what was hidden in me in the shadow that my ego like pushed down, be like, don't look there. And it was like, oh my God, you literally did nothing different. I didn't change you. I didn't ask you. No idea you're thinking this until we had like the conversation like over a month later. And it was like, oh, okay. I don't need him to be that version anymore that I have to come and mommy and rescue and parent and fix, and I don't need to be that for him, and he doesn't need to be it for me.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Yeah, you're like, I don't need to be that version for you. So like, I don't need to not to like let you down. I don't need to mess up. I don't need to. So then by letting go of that, you can stop seeking it. Because it's the seeking. It's like you were seeing me out of balance because you were only seeing the aspects that aligned with the story that you had in the perception. It's like, that's what I say, like, we are, like, everybody is, everything is everything. We're all these things. And it's like, there's plenty of days where I don't do the gardening, but that doesn't mean I like never do it, which is what you're saying, what you're seeing. And it's like, it's something, there's like something really, really empowering in just understanding that and like not using terms like always. Like that's so frustrating. Like we both do it to each other. Like we get in a fight. It's like, you always do this, but then it's like you never do it. Like you never do the gardening. Well, what the fuck? I did it, and I do it someday. But when you're not seeing that, or when you're really, really deep into the story, and it's really easy to say that. But then, kind of like you were saying before, it's like in those moments, like I want to shut down. Because like I'm not going to sit here and defend myself and list off all the times I did the gardening. But it's like when you're doing something like if I'm in the kitchen trying to like cook and you're standing over my shoulder.
Like, do you?
Yeah. And it's like, then it's like, I feel like it's like, oh, well, like I can't be in Elise's kitchen, like what an asshole. So I'll just go not do it. And then it's like, I'm not gonna cook. I'm not gonna offer to do the dishes because that's obnoxious to have someone standing over my shoulder telling me I'm doing the dishes wrong.
Yeah.
So I'll just go do something else. She'll do it anyway.
And then it feeds my narrative.
And then there's then exactly. Yeah. So there's this loop, and then it's like energetically.
And I don't think this is uncommon because I would argue I'm the one who does the laundry. I'm the one who makes the bed. I'm the one who does this and this and this. And words here are key. Really, they are, and it is deciphering. It's literally that question. It's Byron Katie's work, it's Peter Crohn's work, it's all of these people's work. Is that true? Because what is true is always true. And there's not a lot of things that are always true. I don't even think there is anything that's always true. Gravity, people say, like that's like that. And, right, exactly. The trueness
Like,
of who we are. Yeah, I was just
I am is the only thing that's true.
So then you start to break it down. Like you're saying, like I did laundry last week, I washed the dishes, I made dinner, I grilled all summer. It's just now colder, and it's like, oh, yes. So it's really being able to call yourself out on your own bullshit.
Yes.
Like I'm lying to myself to make myself feel better. But in the end, it's hurting both of us, and it's not helping us elevate in our relationship.
Yeah, it's really just perpetuating the same cycle. It's like holding on to that need to feel that feeling.
Yes.
Is like an addiction.
I want to add this though, because what I did work on individually a lot before coming to this conclusion, I think that it was a big requirement to actually have the awareness of the I'm not enough, or I'm not valued, or the only way that I'm valued is my, work around the house, or fixing and rescuing you, because of the also pattern of fear within thinking that I'm going to be abandoned heightened it. Because I didn't want you to leave me. I didn't want to be abandoned, so that I didn't feel like I was worthy in this sense. Again, there's so many layers to the worthiness, but so that's what I wanted to do, everything for you so that you wouldn't leave me. And my fear, I think for so long, was if I allow Dan to just handle everything, and that is such a broad term, but just like handle things that I've been handling, then what if he leaves me and realizes that he actually doesn't need me, and that I'm worthless to him? That was a serious fear. And that was, again, a made up story in my mind that you never said.
Exactly. Let's be really clear here. I never said I'm gonna leave you if you don't do the dishes.
You never said, like, I'm gonna leave you if you make less money than me. I'm gonna leave you if you don't do this business thing or this, whatever. Like, never. Because I was looking through the lens of a past impression from an experience that happened at such a young age, that I thought and think that everybody's gonna abandon me if I don't do the things that they want to do, if I don't help and fix them, because that's how I garner worth. And that's so I hope that also ties into it, until I realized, like, oh, wait a minute. I've been worthy this entire time. I've been worthy my whole life. I don't need to do anything. I just get to do these things as an expression of the love that I now have for myself, the worthiness that I have for myself, the value that I see within myself. And then I can extend that to Dan, my family, my friends, the community, the people around me, where I'm coming from a place of love instead of fear. Fear of, oh my gosh, I don't want him to leave me, in stepping into that like lens of more authentic being.
Yeah. I love that you brought that up, because it lends itself. So it's the conversation of like doing versus being, and what's the difference. And it's like we're all inherently worthy. And like I said earlier, one of the things I also had to work on and had to do a lot of work on is this feeling of not being enough, not being good enough, not being worthy. And coming to the realization, like you just said, is that like every one of us is inherently worthy just for existing. And there is nothing that we can do, good or bad, that will affect that worthiness. There's nothing that we can do that's going to make us more or less worthy. But we get this idea in our head that we need to do things to validate our worth. And we learn it at a young age. It's conditioned and programmed into us at some point. It's like, oh, you ate all your dinner, like you're a good boy, or like, oh, like you put your toys away, you're good. Like, and we get rewarded for certain actions, and we get punished for other actions. And we can't comprehend why our worthiness is being threatened or like allowed at different times, and where our worthiness gets hurt, like, because when we're at that young age, like we know that we're worthy, Like you don't see a baby that's like, oh, I shouldn't cry right now. They might not be happy. If you baby got cry, you can't cry. And whatever, they're hungry. I want food and I want food right now because I'm worthy of it. And then over time we get punished for crying or for asking for something that's like off limits or for whatever it is. And we start to build our concept of ourself around that idea of like, oh no, don't ask if they're not in a good mood because you're not good enough and else everybody's happy. And then you go about like, well, how can I make everybody happy so that I'm good enough? And we literally build our own personality around these coping mechanisms. So then you find yourself being like 39 and assuming that like, ooh, okay, there's certain things out there that I need to do so that I can be good enough and worthy. So I'm going to try to do those, but they never work. So we keep doing and doing and doing endlessly on like a treadmill, just going, trying to get that validation back that we had when we were a baby. And then eventually you do enough work and realize that it's not the doing, it's the being. There's no amount of doing that's going to cause you to be something. But when you be that authentic self, then everything you do is perfect. And I think it's been like such an unbelievable like shift for me into like paradigm shift and understanding to really embrace that and understand that when there are those times when I'm like trying to do something and accomplish something, it's because I forgot to be it. And then you can just sort of like pull back and you go within and realize, okay, wait, no, that I am the thing that I'm seeking. So I can give it to myself because the only thing that's lacking is what I am withholding from myself. So I can give myself that love and give myself that validation and give myself that sense of security and that sense of belonging and sense of worthiness. And then I have it. So then everything I can do, I can be like that baby. I can cry, I can yell, I can throw things, and it's not going to affect my worth because that comes from me.
Yes. It's kind of comical because we're always looking, especially myself. I was always looking for like validation from other people. And then I realized, oh wait, so isn't everybody else.
Yeah.
So no one's why would someone validate? They want me to validate them, or like, yeah, they want me to tell them how good they did, but I want them to tell me how good I did, or oh my gosh, you look so amazing in your outfit. Like I want someone to say that to me. No, you don't. Like you might think that you want the outside validation, but it's from yourself. If you give yourself what you're looking for in someone else, you don't need it from that other person.
That's such a great example because when you have those moments where you look in the mirror and you're like, I look good right now. You could care less if anybody tells you. It's the days where you're like, I'm not sure about this shirt, where you're like, I really hope somebody tells me this shirt looks good because then I'll be sure. But then it's like, well, only one person said they liked my shirt, and there were like 7 people that didn't say they liked my shirt. So then you're like, I don't know, maybe they were just being sarcastic. Were they making fun of me? Did they not like my shirt? Did they like my shirt the least? But it's that when you know, it's that you don't need any validation.
Well, why don't you say you're part of the big conversation because it ties literally exactly into.
Yeah.
Let me go to the bathroom.
So we had this discussion and kind of like what you were saying before, like you were talking about how you had taken on the role of the one who needed to fix everything and control things, and if you weren't here, everything would go to shit. And yeah, and you also said like at the same time, like you wanted to be taken care of, like you wanted me to step up and be this like this like leader of the family and this provider, and this like step into this like masculine like sort of king role kind of thing. and you were like disappointed in me for never doing that. But at the same time, you're kind of controlling of all these situations always felt like you were parenting me. So I'm working with my own shit where it's like, I never feel worthy and good enough. I never feel like, I never felt able to step into that kind of role because I felt really like immature and irresponsible and like not good enough. So the dynamic sort of became like, my concept of you was like, you're always nagging me and like parenting me because you don't think I'm good enough. So I get really, really frustrated. Like every time I'm like trying to do something, you're trying to control it. And like, you're like, you gonna do it like that? And it just be, and then like when you don't have like confidence, the same as I was saying about like the shirt, it's like, oh, like I'm way off on this. Like I can't do this. Everything, like the thing I thought I was gonna, thing I'm really, really excited about and I'm telling you about, and it sucks too. So I'm like, then I'm like, everything I do, I'm bringing this energy of not enoughness to it because I feel like I'm not able to step into like the fullness of my being. Like I'm not able to be a man because my partner is parenting me and making me feel like a child. And it's also like kind of comes back to that same example you used of like we'd get in a fight or something, or like a disagreement, and I'd do something, say something, you'd immediately like snap, and then I'd just feel like a little boy. And I'd be like, I'd shut down because like mommy's mad kind of feeling. And it's like, it sounds kind of creepy to say about like my girlfriend or my partner, but like that was the feeling, is like I would immediately revert to like this scared little boy. So it's like in my life, like I'm trying so hard to step into something new and bigger and like really evolve, but I keep being reminded of being a little boy. And I want to be clear, it's just like you're saying about you. It's like, this is because that's what I was looking for in you. Whereas like I was seeking that out. It's like, you weren't always this. It was just something that I was always perceiving. And then it was like that familiar feeling. So it's like a part of me was addicted to the familiar feeling of being like a shamed little boy. So it's really hard to, even though I wanted to be more than that, it's really hard to let go of it when that like the emotions of that are almost like addictive. And I'm able to get that from you, where that's really like, it's like my soul presenting me with an opportunity to see that like, hey, look, you're clearly not stepping into this role that you want to step into. Like, here it is. And it's a lot easier to be like, well, Elise is a bitch. She just wants to be my mom and my girlfriend. She just wants to control and parent everything and judge you for it rather than looking at myself. So we like perpetuate this thing. So then we have this like almost like vortex going of like you like wanting, not sabotaging, but like you wanting me to fuck up so you can be like, see, I was right. Even though what you really want is for me to handle it and do great. I want to handle it and do great, but I'm seeking out you shaming me for not doing that. So I could be like, oh, she's such a bitch. And then like, this is like the middle container of our relationship.
Yeah.
And we're both having our own relationship with the relationship, where it's like, it was me dating my concept of you, and it was you dating your concept of me, to validate these like aspects of our shadow and like these old emotional like thought feeling loops that we carried around because we weren't willing to love that part of ourselves.
Yeah. It just lends itself so beautifully. Like I was saying, life is like, oh, it makes sense. Bird's eye view. Like we chose ourselves as
Yes.
partners in this life to grow through, to learn, like, yes, like, oh my, like, duh, as soon as we had this open dialogue,
Yeah.
again, like I said, I don't know if it was 20 years in the making, we were too young of versions then, I don't think we were mature enough or wise enough, but like at least a decade, if not longer, of the pattern of this, like mommying me and then coming to the rescue, and then just this cycle, it's like we don't require ourselves to be that version anymore, and it blew up beautifully. It had to, and it wouldn't have happened if we didn't have the awareness, and if we weren't really truthful with each other about how we were feeling, because that's what we were holding in. You were holding back, like, you fucking shame me and you've parent me, like you weren't saying that.
Right, exactly.
And I wasn't saying, all I want you to do is take care of it, like I don't want to handle it. And it was like, oh my God. Okay. All right, our physiology changes, the concept of who we now get to show up is infinite potential. I don't need to be this person anymore. It's like we're in, this is kind of like what you were saying about doing so much versus being so much. Like, who am I being in relation to Dan? Now, take you aside, who am I being in relation to my mom? Who am I being in relation to the podcast guests that we have? Who am I being in relation to the waiter at the restaurant? I show up differently in each one of those dynamics to grow through. Like I said, I can't change every, I can't change if the waiter's an asshole. I can't change if the podcast guest knows so much more than me and I feel inferior, like, oh my God, I'm panicking. I can't change the way my mother is, you know, I'm not gonna,
she'll tell you that.
I was just gonna say, I'm not gonna also reveal her age, but like decades upon decades of constructing this, like, right? I'm gifted with the opportunity to realize, who am I being in relation to Dan? And as soon as you said, I was like, oh my God, I didn't even realize I was doing that. All right. That's not even who I want to be. I want to be a space of pure love and acceptance and understanding and compassion and excitement and adventure and all these things that, like I said, I was energetically blocking all of that and just being this person that I am not anymore. Like that layer is gone.
Yeah. And I feel like having that conversation was such a weight lifted. And you know, like we've said a few times now, it's like we have these ideas that we try to hide and push down and suppress and repress. And that just we just energetically are contributing that energy of restriction and suppression and repression rather than our actual expression. So I was never free to be myself because I needed to hide something. And the need to hide the fact that I was frustrated with you, or the need to hide the fact that I felt shame in those situations, limited me from being myself. But also the idea that you have to be a certain way to make my story make sense limits you, and I wasn't allowing your full expression. So we were both limiting both ourselves and each other. So the relationship was exponentially limited. We could only show up in these limited roles for each other because we weren't allowing the rest of it to exist.
I'm so glad that you said that. I was just about to bring up that point. We're all trying to be the best version of our limited self, if you really think about it. And yeah, I didn't have to. I was gifted the opportunity to really look at, as much as I say I want Dan to change, am I ready to open that door for him to be new, or be authentic, be
Yeah.
what he's always been, as opposed to what I thought he was.
Yeah. And then who would you be in relation to that?
Right. I was just gonna say, there's so many layers to it, because then it's like, well, holy shit, what do I do with that? Because I haven't met that version of me. I don't know it. I'm building it. But it's that's what's exciting. That's the creation.
Yeah.
That's loving. That's literally what we're creating. That's how we learn. We're in a relative world. We can't learn without other things. That's the unity. That's the oneness. That's why we break off. That's why we're fragmented. We want to experience, and the only way to do that is through duality. I mean, we've got to relate to something, whether that be a person, a thing, a circumstance, situations, everything we're in relation to. And so with this dynamic of both of us, it's now, whoosh, I feel like, we always need the Vesica Pisces as part of our thing. That middle, I mean, that's now, I feel, grown in each direction, that spiral, it's expanded so much as we are. And we can look at it from, like I said, a higher elevated state. It's not necessarily that we're going forward in a direction. I don't know what future Dan is going to be. I haven't met him. All I can continue to do is look at you from an elevated point, an elevated now state of consciousness, that I have seen you differently. And it's ever since that talk, and it wasn't even that long ago. I don't know if we've had this conversation, but I see you differently. It's like, oh, and I pick up on different things that you're doing in new ways. And I wonder if I just missed it before. Have you always done it? Or is this, I am not, again, trying to pat my back, but, or did I do this? Like, am I creating this and creating this in a way that's like, all right, I'm excited. This is new. This isn't scary like I thought it was going to be. I mean, we just had the conversation. We'll check back in another year, but like, I don't foresee that happening, because I don't also think, I think we hit our limit, our growth limit within that like frame of awareness for you and I. Like, it imploded in the best way. Like it said, it turned it, Phoenix rising from the sun, like the ashes. It was beautifully blossomed from that.
And there'll be new stuff, and there'll be other levels to work through, obviously, but it is like, I feel like it would be really hard to fall back into those roles in the same way. We kind of started the show talking about, though we fell into those roles really hard as we moved here and started this new adventure, where it was like all of a sudden it was just us, and we were kind of thrown into these patterns. So I think even though they had always been there, we really fell into the grooves that it was like you said, you intuitively knew it was time to deal with it. It's like, this is the next step. It's time to address this, and it's going to present really, really heavily until you do. And it got really, really bad, really, really fast. And then it, like, instantly, like, none of this stuff is linear. It was like, we in a moment got to be new versions of ourselves and got to be authentic for the first time, like truly be authentic, which is crazy after 20 years.